I want you to do an exercise and just go with me on this. I want you to think about the last decade of your life. Think about all the experiences you've had, the places you've gone, kind of who you've been over the last decade. We need this perspective to answer 2 questions. Number 1, I would like you to write down the top 10 most expensive things that you've purchased over the last 10 years. These are likely things like a car, a house, potentially electronic equipment or furniture. Brainstorm these things and write down your top 10 most expensive. When you're done, or take some time to noodle over it for a bit, and then come back. Now, I want you to make another list beside your first one on a separate page or on the back, below, wherever. And I want you to list out the 10 things that have brought you the most value in your life over the past 10 years. I think about contentment when I think about value, or that's one of the ways that I measure value. So I would think about those 2 things together. So take your time and list your top 10 as well. In my top 10 for most expensive things, I would have my couch in there, my laptop, and my camera that I'm filming on right now. In the top 10 most valuable in that list, I would put moving out alone, a particular sunrise I watched last October, a trip to Nova Scotia to see my brother. Putting these lists side by side is probably going to elicit some kind of response for you. That is their intended purpose anyways. And it might be self-evident what you're supposed to get from this, but I want you to hold on because I think I have some things to say that will add to your perspective or enhance your perspective a little bit. Now, this exercise was created by the minimalists, and I really like it at a baseline level. I think that there are some lessons that we can glean from this, and the intended purpose of this is to see one list on one side, one list on the other, and realize that there are no overlaps. That the stuff, our most expensive stuff, our prized possessions, if you will, are prized possessions, yet these are not the things that actually bring us value in life. That is an important lesson and an important takeaway. And I kind of feel like it bears repeating. The stuff that we've spent all our most money on, our most time and attention, hours working, our prized possessions or our most expensive possessions, this stuff is still not the thing or the stuff that brings us value in life. I get that point, and they're right. And I think that that's something to consider and noodle over, especially as we, live our lives. And I think this could be maybe a fun or important or necessary journaling exercise if you are feeling maybe a little bit down or you're struggling with gratitude. You could pull out this technique every handful of weeks or months or years, and it adds some necessary perspective. The things that we value most in life is usually not stuff. And you have some tangible evidence in your life that shows you in your life as it stands what those high value things are. But as always, I do have a bit of a pushback on this. And something doesn't have to be perfect in order to glean value from it. So I'm not saying that this exercise is like dead or useless, because there is true value on it. But I feel like we could maybe go a little bit deeper. Now, when I think about my list, one of the things on my list was moving out on my own. And while I subsequently moved in with my partner a couple of years later, that was really important and such a happy, joyful thing that has allowed for a lot of joyful memories. There's actually something that my partner and I do every day that's really solidified a piece of contentment in my life that is only possible from moving in together. But when you think about something like that, moving alone wasn't really about where I lived. It was the fact of being alone, moving out of toxic environments that weren't helpful for my mental well-being, but also being alone showed me a lot about who I am and allowed to foster growth. really important and amazing things happened as a result of being alone. One thing, a couple of years of my life that I will for sure cherish. However, being alone or having my own apartment was facilitated by money. Going on a trip to Nova Scotia, I needed the flight at the very least. This stuff isn't free, even if the thing I wanted to do at the base was free. And so we do need money in order to facilitate stuff or memories. And I think that's one of the minimalists' point as well, is that we do need money in order to make these memories happen and have things that we truly cherish. We just need to funnel our money in different ways. Most people, at least all the people I know, don't spend a lot of money without thought. My most expensive items are the things that I spent a long time deciding over. Very few people are cavalier with things that are expensive. So it's a good chance that the things on our list, all, if not the majority of them, were well thought or considered purchases. So in terms of throwing away your money or spending money on things you don't need or things that are wasteful or things that don't have any value, I don't really feel like this stuff falls into that line of thinking. Just in terms of, let's say, everyday value, the stuff on my list are probably some of the most functional items that I own. My laptop, I don't value it in the same way as I do a trip with my partner. You just don't value it the same. But in terms of functional value, might be the most, if not in the top 3 most functionally valuable things that I own. So even if you need your work laptop and it's even a really functionally valuable thing, you still don't value it the same as you do a family member or a cherished event. I'm sure there's also stuff that I own and that you own that its actual physical, tangible value is at $2 or something like that. But the value it has to you is worth millions. What we can do with this information is use it to help us kind of guide where we spend our money and why. So spending money on a trip, still spending money, but the why is really clear that, we want to explore a new city or a new country and we want to build memories along the way. And that can have more value than a couple of sweaters hanging in your closet. But I want to go deeper than that. And I want you to do a third exercise. Bear with me again. Beside all of these lists, or both of these lists, I want you to make a third one. And I want you to write down the last 10 things that you've purchased, with the exception of groceries. So if you bought a new foundation, or if you bought some, bath mats for your bathroom, whatever the last 10 things are, even if it's something like coffee, it's a consumable, write them down. And also, even if you return the thing in your top 10, or your most recent 10, I should say, write them down too. So, a couple of questions for you here. How hard was it for you to think about the last 10 things that you've purchased? How many of those things have you returned? And how many of those things are truly functional and or needs instead of things that are wants or make life comfortable items? The bulk of how we spend our money isn't in this big stuff, isn't in the laptop that we buy or the camera that we buy. There, I'm sure, stand out items that, you truly don't buy all that much. The majority of how we spend our money is in the little things, is in the $30 items, the $50 items. That's where our money goes. That's where our time goes. And in my opinion, if we really want to think about, are we spending all of our time and money on stuff? To me, it makes more sense to think about all of the useless crap instead of all of the high-end stuff that we've bought that is functional and serves a purpose. Because if we want to talk about value, the expensive stuff has functional value most of the time. And therefore we can say, oh, it was worth the money. But the $10,000 that you spent on Amazon in the last 2 years, that is a lot of money. And it doesn't really have functional value either. Yes, we need everyday stuff, but how much of what you're buying is actually an everyday need? If you were to count up every single thing that you bought in a year beyond strict, like literally strict groceries, how much of your money would be going to necessities of some kind? And I think many of us have really forgotten, or maybe we've just combined our needs and our wants, where we talk about our wants like they are needs. If you have clothes to wear, you don't need more clothes, and that can't ever really be described as a need. More clothes will almost never be a need. More of anything will almost never be a need. Part of that minimalist exercise was to think about value, but also think about how much time, energy, and money we spend in stuff that doesn't actually matter. That is 10 times fold when we look at our everyday spending and our everyday stuff. And I was listening to a podcast recently where this guy, he was talking about his wake-up call for why he changed his spending habits. And he was talking on a podcast recently, but his experience was about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, 2012, 2013, he went onto Amazon and looked at how much money he spent in the last 365 days. Turned out he spent about $12,000 on Amazon. That's like a year's worth of tuition, even 10 years ago. And this was his wake-up call for thinking about, changing his spending. Not only is $10,000 a year a lot of money, and that could go towards doing a lot of things, even putting it towards something more valuable, like, let's say, a trip. A $10,000 trip, even in 2023, is still a nice trip. You could still do a lot of things with $10,000. And one of the things that he said really surprised me. He cataloged all of his items, and he found that he spent, it was around 300 things. It was a little bit more than 300. The bulk majority of his money, the bulk majority of the 300 items was around 200 things that were $30 or less. So the vast majority of his purchases were under $30. And he could barely remember all of that stuff. And he also, even when he looked at his list of stuff, he still couldn't remember it. And he also didn't own a lot of it a few years later. Not 10 years later, but 2 or 3 years later, he didn't own a lot of that stuff anymore. This is the comparison that I feel like we need to be making. Not with the high value stuff, not with the high functional stuff, with the everyday stuff. Because this is when stuff owns us. This is when we work 40 hours a week to become storage facilities. This is when we spend all of our time and money working for things that ultimately end up being crap, that end up being decluttered, that end up being functionally or even emotionally useless after a year. This is when shopping starts to consume our lives, and this is when we really lose sight of what we value, when we start chasing stuff for the sake of stuff. This is when shopping starts to consume our lives, and this is when we really lose sight of the values list, of thinking about what we value and realizing what we value and even putting our money into those things. There is a trade-off in life. We can't pursue financially the things that we value if we're spending our money in these useless ways. I know what I said earlier, that some of what we value in life, we need money to make that happen. But it's also really easy to remind ourselves as well when we're getting swept up that the stuff that we really value in life isn't the money, isn't the trips or the cars or the house or like the closet full of clothes. It's the memories we make and the people that we meet and the relationships that we get to foster. I don't want to say all of that is free because that's not always free, but a lot of the times you can do that for free. And we can't make the memories. We can't foster the relationships. We can't do our most valued stuff, the stuff we intrinsically value, if we're so caught up doing other things, if we're so caught up shopping, if we're so caught up scrolling and browsing, and even we could extend that to working. It's so easy to get caught up in all of the other stuff that we don't focus or make time for the stuff that we like value in our hearts. I know that's kind of cheesy, but that's what this really kind of leads me to. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I would actually really like to know what is on your list. And did creating those first two lists, did that help you just kind of create a mindset shift or like maybe like a mental reset in the moment? Because I feel like just doing that will have an effect on its own, like a mental refresh. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to hear or see you again here soon.